you arrested for trespassing.
Hey, okay, jeez, calm down, lady.
Here I come.
Hi, I'm Casper.
Generally, stars bring baggage with them. Casper, I was afraid, probably had a little bit of his own. I mean, you've been searching for a friend for, maybe 50 years longer. You're gonna walk onto a film set. I honestly didn't know if we were gonna hit it off.
Well, Casper comes to work, and everybody kind of stands still and says, "Good morning, Casper."
I kind of tolerate it because, he's the headliner on this thing, and I've been told that he gets sensitive.
We all hear horror stories. I'd heard a couple of stories, tantrums, excessive demanding. But I figured we could probably work it out, And as I say, with the exception of a couple times when it was a little tough to get him out of the trailer, he was fine.
Well, he could have been a little friendlier on the set, I suppose. He was a nice enough guy, but that Hollywood act, I could see right through him.
He's a big star, but he was really nice, and he came up and said hi. One thing, though, he's kind of driving the makeup people crazy. He's obsessive about this pale thing.
He was saying to me that, it's no good putting me against this light background, Leslie. I need something to be seen against. So I've had to consider that from the beginning.
It's hard to light him badly, because, he just photographs very well.
When they first see Casper, they usually go, "Ghost!" That's what they usually do. But he's nice.
No, you shouldn't do that, or you'll be... Too late.
Casper simply came to be out of the fond and collective memories of everyone who remembers the cartoon.
My involvement started back when we were in post-production on Jurassic, and Stephen was very attached to this project and had hired Sherry and Deanna to start writing Casper.
I knew who Casper was from cartoons. When I was in 4th grade, I used to come home and watch Casper cartoons.
And I just remembered a sort of wispy young fellow who was a little bit wimpy and a little bit soft.
Now, that's part of the principle that we've used within our storyline, but what we've tried to do is to bring Casper into the 90s, to modernize him in a way.
But Stephen, when he got an inkling to try to put this project together and thought it was a great idea to do Casper, sought out the talents of Deanna Oliver and Sherry Stoner.
Sherry and Deanna, I've known for years because they both worked with me on Tiny Toon Adventures.
And Stephen thought they would be perfect for this project because of that background. And they work great as a team. And they're very good at writing humor.
And they're a female frickin' frack. I mean, they finish each other's sentences. They're very kind with each other. And he really brought them in to try to bring Casper to life.
Well, I think the cartoon background helped us explore all possibilities in a space. That's what you do when you write cartoons. You say, I'm in this space, what possibly could a character make use of in this space? And so our minds were real open to that kind of thing.
Casper, as we've created him, has a real, we always laugh saying, this Casper has tude, he's got attitude.
So we took him from where he is and added, instead of just him wanting a friend, him falling in love.
With the girl who is his friend.
And they had never written a feature film script before, and they said, is it like animation? And I said, it can be. Matter of fact, I wish more films were like animation. It would be easier to control and to get your vision up there on the screen. So because they have unfettered imaginations, as you know, in animation, you can do anything.
We didn't limit ourselves to thinking of it as a live-action movie. We were aware sometimes that it was, but in reality, we played it as we played the ghosts as physical beings, much like you would a cartoon, and we played the humans, Dr. Harvey and Kat, like a regular movie, you see what I mean? Like a live-action movie.
So they brought some of their toon logic to the physical world.
We would sit there and say, now, could that possibly be done? And we would say, well, somebody will tell us if it can't. And so we didn't stop ourselves from anything.
Wrote a wonderful draft of the screenplay that we didn't veer very far away from.
It's the most awful job in the world, being a director. It's the worst job in the world. Horrible. You have no social life. You can't even get a pee. Ask him when he last had a chance for a pee. It's a trick question for you. Pooh, forget it. Number 2's last week. Oh. That's why they always have that anxious expression on their faces, directors. They have no time to go to the toilet.
Start dancing in the middle of the day, you know why. It was certainly last minute, let's put it that way.
We went through a process where we had a creative fallout and we had to change the directors quite late in the pre-production process.
Who are you gonna call?
Someone else.
The director that we had on the film left the project, and I called Brad. He was my next phone call.
I was in Oahu, and I got sort of a 911 phone call from Amblin. And already I was suspicious, and indeed it turned out to be the Casper call.
And I said, "Are you interested in feature films? I think I have your first feature, although it's kind of an ambitious first feature. It's not one of these esoteric little personal films that can be shot for, you know, $2 million in Connecticut. Instead, it was a $40 million special effects comedy about Casper the Friendly Ghost."
The first thing I said to Stephen when he called, calling about a picture dealing with CGI, dealing with a large number of on-set effects, post effects. I said, "You had to have called the wrong Brad. You sure which Brad you called?" He said, "I know exactly who I called."
Well, he was didn't really know quite what to say because he was in a production meeting and he didn't quite take it in, and I kind of had never met the guy or spoken to him before, and I said, "Well, I tell you what, Brad, if why don't you let me fly out for the weekend?"
So along comes Colin, very lovely, incredibly dapper British man who I had never met before. He shows up in Hawaii with this steamer trunk. And again, before I can say anything, he said, "Let me just walk you through a few things." So Colin arrives and pulls out a display of early sketches from the production designer. He pulls out old pieces of Casper illustrations. He pulls out early foam sort of maquette concepts, anything to try to seduce the director. It's basically like, look, we have all the costumes, let's put on a show.
Are you sure we're not going a tad overboard here?
Stephen had met Christina Ricci. I believe he already slipped her a copy, an early copy of Casper, let her know about it. And so she, through her representation, expressed interest in the project.
The script was kind of funny because it was like about Casper the Friendly Ghost, but then had these really sarcastic twists to it, really biting kind of stuff, which is really funny.
Christina is the one actor that I've ever had a chance to work with who at times, as I would try to draw an analogy to a character, a moment from a motion picture or a television show, would turn to me very dryly and say, "Brad, 1980, Brad. I was born in 1980. I have no idea what you're talking about. You are old."
Everybody in this movie is very different. I mean, you have Christina, who's 14, going on 30. And you have Bill, who's Dr. Harvey.
When you think about the part of Dr. Harvey, who really had to be sort of a modern-day Jimmy Stewart, and also incredibly elastic in terms of some of the physical comedy, some of the physical choreography that would go on, my mind kept coming back to Bill Pullman.
I remember that it was just after Thanksgiving, and they said that they called about this movie Casper the Friendly Ghost, and that I would be, they were interested in talking about Dr. Harvey, which was a good part, even though I hadn't seen the script yet, and that the director was this hot shot kid.
I stole somebody's car phone. I had somebody drive me home, and I basically got on the phone with him and begged him for about an hour, did the full song and dance.
Well, it was a bet, but the fact that we talked so long.
We really did. It was very cool.
Made it clear that it was going to be.
It was like, boom, to be able to talk about, I mean, again, we're talking about Casper, but still we were talking about fairly remarkable things and talking about loss and memory, talking about what moves us and issues of grieving. And I mean, this is all about Casper. So this was the first phone call.
That's rare. Rare.
Bad guys are Carrigan and Dibbs. Carrigan's played by Kathy Moriarty, and Dibbs is played by Eric Idle.
The role wasn't very well written in the screenplay. it was something that we needed. We needed someone like an Eric to create the role for, and we were always grasping to try and find that perfect match for Kathy.
Kathy's great. I mean, we hang out sometimes on the weekends and stuff, and as soon as I met her, she said, come on over. We talked and stuff. She's great.
She's my pal. We have slumber parties. We have slumber parties and we do some serious shopping.
That's right.
Big time shopping.
Right.
Trash just about everybody and talk about boys.
Kathy had been cast, which I was thrilled about. Somebody I wanted badly, and Stephen fully agreed with. Eric Idle, I never, in a blue moon, thought we would actually have a shot at getting him.
He's being annoyingly funny. Irritating. We don't like funny people on this film, do we?
Nobody funnier than us.
Nobody has
We don't
to
like
funny.
to be shown up.
Especially if they're not being hurt or rained on or blown up.
Yeah, if things aren't being thrown at them. I mean, I really don't think why they should. I don't know why they should get the laughs.
You guys are doing some dangerous stuff. I saw
Yes, and we're not getting paid a lot more for it, are we?
No, I don't understand how.
You are?
You have Eric, who's English and hysterical. He makes me laugh all day long. Hysterical.
What you saying?
I was saying something actually very nice about you, Purple Man.
Oh, stop that.
Okay.
Nothing nice at all.
And we have the
I'm not
best
saying anything nice about you.
I am the insufferable Carrigan Crittenden, and he's just dibs.
Just a comic wonderment to just behold all of his invention. He invents so much original material that went into Casper.
And what we realized was that the most bang for the buck we were going to get with him was really just letting him rip.
What's it like working with Casper?
It's just,
He's not there.
he's not there.
No, not really there.
Yeah.
But
But the ghost,
apparently he's having a torrid affair. That's what I hear. The trailer's bouncing around an awful lot for a ghost.
We used to have big laughs about how I had to have a hard time getting Casper to come out of his trailer. And, and after a while, you actually believe it.
Looking for a voice for a cartoon character is real tough. It has to be just right. It has to fit the character. We were real lucky because we found Malachi Pearson. He turned out to be a real good Casper voice and has given the character a lot of life.
He is Casper as far as I'm concerned. He really embodies the spirit and the savvy and the great charm and enthusiasm of Casper.
Because the voice of Casper is the soul of Casper, and that's what you're going to feel when you hear him speak, and you're going to sympathize with him, understand him, and all that will come from the performance. The performance starts with the voice.
Malachi was 12 when he was put on tape. And again, just in terms of the sheer exuberance and animation in his voice, and he also had just enough of an interesting kind of timbre that you could tell that he just was going to be something you wouldn't tire of hearing, and that it captured, I guess, some of the innocence of the original animated character, but again, around the movie, I wanted it to feel like a little adolescent kid. And Malachi was that, and he was wonderful, and he just stood out.
I interviewed like 5 or 6 times, and then finally I got the part in the film by going in and interviewing with like all the whole cast and with Steven Spielberg and everything, and I blew it. I thought I blew it like so bad, and I just like, at the end, I just left and I told my Mom, I don't think I got this one. This one's over. They called me up before I got home, so that was pretty cool. I had a message on my answer machine. I was just going crazy at my house. My first big movie.
I love the smell of fleshies in the morning.
The ghostly trio, Casper's uncles.
Stinky, Stretch, and Fatso. Brad Garrett, Joe Napoli, and Joe Lasky are
The ghost cast in the film, the ghostly trio and Casper, are all obviously voice actors, at least for the benefit of our film. And I knew that if all we got out of them was what was scripted, we were going to again be short. It was not going to be what it could be. What you wanted was a group of voices, a group of talent who could be on set while we were shooting. So that there can be true interaction between the live actors in front of the camera and the voices behind the camera.
The Ghostly Trio was very loosely written in the beginning, and they really weren't sure what they wanted. It was just pretty much an outline, just a couple lines of dialogue, and I would say that 70% of the auditions were improv.
I mean, and the reality was, it was as close to an improvisational, large budget special effects film as you could really come across other than the story.
The 3 ghosts are a crack up. We had trailers right next to each other, and they would just they'd play jokes on me. They treat me just like they treat me in the movie, in like real life.
They would be off
in another part of the set, which was good. Brad kind of put them off into their own little world and gave them each their camera, or they had one camera?
We kind of shoved them together and give them one video reference camera, exactly.
And we had to be involved in the scenes, but we couldn't be where the camera could see us.
We were encouraged to ad-lib from the beginning.
Like a thoroughbred racehorse, they're on the track, their nostrils are out, they're ready to ride for the crew.
Yeah.
It was almost like licensed to be the class clown, you know? Where all the other kids had to follow the rules, but these three guys, okay, it's our turn, do whatever you want.
They're animals at that. They tear it up. It's like throwing meat into the lions, man. So you just was thankful they were far away.
He was very loose and free form with trying things. He was very open. I think each of the ghosts have a couple lines in the film that were actually ad-libs.
I think my biggest one was scream or sugar when the coffee's being poured sideways.
It was the scene where Bill Pullman, we were skeet shooting in his office, and he threw, we threw the picture of his wife, Amelia, and he walks into the shot all of a sudden and grabs it. And he says, not that one. And then I go, who is she, Doc? You know, and Stinky says something, and he says, it's my wife, Amelia. She's dead. And I just all of a sudden went, hey, better yet, right? And Brad Silberling was right there and said, that's great, Fatso, you say that. I went, no.
And there was an incredible competition there, because again, it's not one thoroughbred. It's like literally you got a pack of them.
Yeah.
And so if you've got the actor looking for something that's at least somewhat reliable coming from off screen, and suddenly it's like, woo, getting thrown a big spin, and he's the one on camera having to sit and stay in the moment. It's an interesting dance.
You will die too when it happens to you. Big finish. Oh, scream or sugar?
You have to give credit to Brad Silberling and Les Dilley for really communicating a vision, a really wild, elliptical, fun but a little bit scary vision of a haunted house for the 90s.
We knew we wanted something unusual because of, in the wake of all of our images of haunted houses, even as recent as the Addams Family, we wanted to come up with something interesting and different.
I suggested up front that maybe we should go for a house which is not the stereotype haunted house, which is usually Victorian, and offered up a different style of architecture. Maybe we're going for Art Nouveau, turn-of-the-century architecture, Gaudi-esque.
Going back to the original Casper cartoons, that was actually the style, the art direction that was in the animation. So we really drew from that to give it this wonderful sense. But I got to tell you, walking into stage 12, where we had our main mansion interior for the first time, even in its skeletal phase, I just took my breath away.
It's an awesome set. You're totally in awe of what you're looking at. I personally have never seen anything of this scale and magnitude, and everyone who comes on the stage is just amazed that you've got like a 3-story mansion on a soundstage.
And that still isn't big enough for the mansion, so what we will use to finish the house off is what they would call a matte shot, which is where one would establish the rest of the house with a painting, and the film is exposed twice and showing the matte painting above the actual building.
A film like Casper has a lot of computer-generated characters and acting that's computer-generated, but the environments were all completely real. In fact, it made it even more interesting because frequently the characters were flying. So you had a lot more coverage of the environment than you would with people that are standing and talking to each other on a normal human level. So you had to remember the ceiling. You had to remember odd angles of the floor if you were up above them looking down. So there was a lot more coverage, and Les and his art department designed sets that could be fully covered with the camera. So oftentimes, although the public may not realize it, we don't often have ceilings on sets. But in this case, every single set was 360 degrees.
The color density of walls and props on sets, when you're considering CGI, which is computer-generated images, of ghosts especially, which are kind of semi-transparent and at best white or grayish. To get those to stand out, the levels of the sets, the colors of the sets have to be up around 80%. In other words, if you have a yellowish color, it wants to be darkish yellow. You can't have a light yellow.
I think that Les Dilley has done a phenomenal job to create something that is both scary and fluid. It's not only just this monstrosity that just sits there, but it has this kind of really fluid quality, so that the sense of flying through it and the sense of running through it and everything is accentuated, so that it becomes a very exciting place as well as scary.
This is the most incredible set I've ever been on in all the movies I've ever done. Any of them. This is the most amazing. I walked on and I was like, oh, I thought that they were gonna leave it up. They're gonna tear this down. I would live here.
Then when it's photographed beautifully and lit, in the way it was intended, it really is satisfying. Go to dailies and there you see it. I mean, the great hall in the mansion, and the two kids arrive there for the first time. It's pretty daunting. It's all turned out, touch wood, just like I envisaged it. It's a nice feeling when you see that. I like it.
And then he invented a machine to bring him back to life. Lazarus.
Well, the Up and Atom machine went through probably, 4 or 5 different sets that we built, and different parts of it were filmed at completely different times. But of course, when you see it in the film, it's all cut together, and you can't tell that it was filmed at different times and different places.
Ed's my art director, and he's been a guinea pig in the chair. We're actually at the beginning of the chair ride, which has all the Up and Atom machinery. And this is supposedly the control unit, and we'll be flashing and electronics working everywhere. If I can push Ed, these are the things that on camera will appear to start the machinery we're just coming to. Now, this machinery, with various things, are operated by people above and people to the sides. They're special effects men who manufactured this equipment. This one throws a jet of water down on Ed like that. Oh, sorry, did I get you, Ed? Oh. And then it comes...
You didn't tell me about that part, Les.
And then it comes out here, you see, and then that wipes his face, you see, and cleans him, dries him all off. And then we carry on, and this comes across and gives him a teeth brushing on the way, and then it goes off. It comes further down, he gets squirted with foam, shaving foam, and on the end of here, there will be 2 cutthroat razors operated once again by somebody up above, which give you a shave. Then we go on, and he gets a rinse off here, and then the next lot of Up and Atom machinery, which will be substituted for these. Here we are once again in the tunnel, the Up and Atom tunnel, which we've completely redressed with a new set of machinery, water sprays, side dressing of liquids, a toweling off screen here, 2 of them actually, one there, and then onto the air ducts, which are operated like this by the bellows, onto combing device, 2 of them, one either side and one on the top. And further along, getting dressed here by a bow tie over the head. And now I guess we have to go off to work in the laboratory.
Oh, this is great.
Hi, Rosemary.
This is really fun.
We're in the subterranean vault here and the laboratory from the mansion. And Rosemary's making an arrival here in the chair that brings you down from the library.
Oh, this is great, Les.
And that was a great set to bring, kids to, my kids, with the water and kind of jumping over the water, and then the car that comes down on the track to the desk, and it's just the scale of it was, it's like the coolest set.
Yeah, very remarkable.
And it's huge, like it comes up on all the walls, it's all rock and stuff, and there's like a moat around it. It's really pretty, like water. It's like this really gorgeous green water. And you go across the moat, and there's this pool in the center. It's actually where Esther Williams used to do all her swimming stuff. I found that later. They did it in the pit. That's her pool. And out of that comes the Lazarus, which is like this green machine, and it's really kind of odd looking.
Pull the lever.
In most cases, the physical gags were really fun because you can lie there on the floor like we would and just imagine what could happen. Imagine what a ghost could do that a human couldn't do. Imagine what kind of fun ways a ghost would approach a situation versus a live human being.
But I remember saying, I have to work out. And I'm not an actor that really works out at all. But I really was aware right off from reading this thing that it was going to be physically really demanding. And I have never worked as hard physically in any picture.
Big upper body strength.
Yeah, because
it was a sword fight in the movie, and I brought in 3 or 4 stuntmen, and Bill, we rehearsed and I choreographed the sequence with these stuntmen fighting Bill.
You know, that was 65 steps. And you had to be able to go up them backwards and doing full isometrics of things, doing stops of hits and everything with 3 things that could move at instantaneous speed all around you.
So it's rather difficult fighting something that isn't there when you're shooting it.
And do it 16, 17 takes.
It was just fun to watch Bill Pullman really master the art of working to nothing, so, you know, to the animation to be.
It's a very hard thing to kind of fake that you're hitting somebody with a sword, because you always bob a little bit. You know, whereas if you weren't, you just, if with the real sticks, you hit something and you can really hold it. So those dead stops are what was really hard. Do you remember me saying to you, Brad, you are watching this monitor and you're looking for monitor perfection. You're forgetting the fact that I am killing myself out here.
And finally it's like, hello. I'm human here, I'm dying. Would you just...
Who do you think you are to file our domicile, huh?
There were a whole slew of props that were created that every time the ghost interacts with a prop, the prop is generally a computer graphics prop. And they are basically indistinguishable from real props. And there are shots, in fact, where they switch from a actual prop that was shot in the live action scene to a computer graphic rendered 3D element.
Dad comes in the door, Casper settles into, right, as she closes the door, turns around, he has just settled in on his question. She builds to camera.
I think in that case, let's start with real for her.
Okay.
And then the thing to do would be to stage it so that Casper grabs it like this.
Exactly.
And then she can bring it forward.
Right.
I want to make the switch to CG bottle.
Before you change.
Yeah, we just dump the real bottle. Just a pop-out.
We lose it during the
on a pillow. It's out of the frame and just do the switch.
Okay, well, thanks, Scott.
So there's a lot of interaction where the ghosts handle different prop elements which were existing as real elements on the set, but as soon as a ghost picked this element up, we had to make that computer graphic so that they could handle it freely and not be tied into an element in the shot that was hung on wires and would really restrict your animation too much.
It was interesting, I found, that they had experience on Amblin movies, which I found a little frightening, that they would like to pull what they called a life mask.
You'd need to get someone who has a slightly smaller, narrower face than the actor, and then they take a mold of Brian's face, so it's Brian's face on the inside with the actor's face on the outside. But it works real well, and you know, it's definitely the way to go. It allows you to photograph the double much closer than you could normally.
This one was weird because you would see the guy with your life face and hair all done up, walking around. And it's like the Frankenstein version of you, because it's obviously not quite real.
Right.
But from a distance, it looks really real.
There are a number of pieces in the Lazarus sequence where we had lost Christina, and we'd have this young woman, and it was always a little eerie to me. Suddenly, you know, someone would turn up on set with that life mask, and I always assumed there was a director running around with a life mask. You have to know where the characters are in the frame in order to direct the movie, because I didn't want to direct this any differently than I would if I had live actors.
It's weird. It's really different. I mean, when I'm acting, there's nobody there. They give me like a mark or something to look at. They film once with the maquettes in.
Three-dimensional shapes, we call them maquettes, of the ghostly trio and Casper and whoever is supposed to be in the scene later for positioning, sizing, scale, and lighting.
And also off camera, they have some guy working on a computer.
And he would be set up, you know, kind of off to the side of the set, and you'd kind of like be going for coffee or something, and going down a different way than you normally go, and there'd be Phil nibbling.
I'm getting the live video feed from the live-action camera, and while they're rehearsing the shot, I'm drawing Casper on my graphics tablet on the computer, and my image is superimposed onto the incoming video footage from the 35mm camera. The process is usually called an animatic, but we laughingly call it a Casper-matic, which I guess makes me a Casper-mater.
Phil was only supposed to be on probably through like a month after we wrapped principal photography. But what I discovered very quickly was, again, I had very specific ideas of these performances, and that what was not going to be functional was simply saying to the gang at ILM, okay, he starts here, crosses to this mark, moves over, hit go. It just didn't work. So Phil's commitment to the movie grew and stayed on. And it was literally Phil who helped me learn the language of animation so that I could speak to the animators.
That becomes basically our roadmap of positions in the frame as the camera's moving or as the scene is progressing. How big should Casper be? Where should he be in the frame? What's his look? What's his mood? And we actually extrapolated a lot of the acting information from that.
While I'm doing the scenes, I'm talking into a camera in this voice thing in one of these mics, and they take my voice, and while I'm taking my voice, I do all the actions, so that's why they have a camera in front of me, so whenever I do, Casper does in the movie.
We did a lot of studying of what the real actors look like, to kind of understand what their behavior is, what their little idiosyncrasies are, and the little quirks they have, and how they move their eyes and face and nose and arms and that.
They are using us as models for the characters, in as much as the characters were already pretty much drawn to look a certain way. Well, when they saw me, they said, well, you look just like the character anyway. So do you mind if we use your dental structure and other facial features?
Gentlemen, happy hour.
Happy hour.
Happy hour.
When Stephen and I first talked about doing the movie, he wanted to know if I was interested at all in working with the editor that he's worked with for close to 20 years. And again, in the world of getting the keys to the car, I couldn't believe my fortune. Michael Kahn.
Well, Michael cuts a lot of movies for me, as you know, all of them that I direct. But Michael was in between films, as I was in between films, and I said, hey, I'd like to do a comedy about ghosts.
We were just finishing Schindler's List, and it was a heavy subject, and everybody was depressed. I certainly was depressed. And Stephen thought that he put me together with Brad Silberling. He thought we'd get along fine. And he felt I needed a good comedy to lighten me up a bit, because that picture really took a lot out of all of us.
And Michael was also extremely articulate in CGI work, because he worked with me on Jurassic Park, and he's worked many years with ILM.
Special effects were fun. We had a lot of special effects. We must have had over 400 effects. And for a director, these effects were difficult, because you don't see the uncles and you don't see Casper, but what we did, we had dialogue.
You can get a pretty good timing from what we call the guide track of how long a particular shot's going to be.
So I'd be able to rhythm out the cuts so we know what's on there with the dialogue, and then when it was approved, ILM was able to take it, and off the dialogue they would make their effects. They'd put Casper in there and the uncles. And
the way that develops is that we hand over a sequence to ILM, which at that time is just blank plates.
Every animator gets basically a shot package. He has the Casper-matic on it. He's got the reference maquette section. He's got the plain background blank plate.
We send that then to Industrial Light and Magic as a guideline, essentially, for where these poor guys are in the frame. Where is Casper? Where are his uncles?
And this will be used then as a guide by the guys in ILM, the animators in ILM, who are working in 3D.
We worked with models that came from LA that showed what the characters They thought the interpretation of a 2D character should be like in 3 dimensions. And this is an example of the maquette or model that we got for Casper. And from that, we worked and rebuilt the scan data into something that we could use for our shots. So on the left, we have a depiction of the scanned 3D model, and here is our rebuilt version. We also, along the way, went through a lot of design changes so that Casper was more appealing on screen.
With Casper, there's not one ghost that isn't created from scratch, which means that the computer animators, those talented geniuses, have to be able to act for our characters.
An animator is just an actor who's camera shy. You know, they don't want to get up in front of the camera themselves, but they want to act it out through their character and sort of push their character out in front of the camera.
You might notice we all have mirrors at our desk, both the animators and the modelers, because everything we have to convey to the audience with these expressions is got to be based on the expressions we're familiar with in the human face.
In each case, for each of the ghosts, we had to create a neutral facial expression, and then from those facial expressions, create a variety of expressions and phonetic mouth shapes so that the animators could use these to help the ghost act.
I mean, we'll have to figure out what to do after that point.
We found early in the project that because the computer gives us such flexibility in building the characters to look any way we want, that we would also have to make sure that when these faces moved about, that the form remained consistent to make sure that Casper always appears to be basically in character.
Everyone who knows anything about animation knows that a lot of the animator is in the shot. And sometimes one of the things that we're fighting is that, you know, you're constantly getting them to not put too much of themselves in it, because then it looks like them instead of like the character.
Since you have maybe 4 or 5 animators animating one character throughout the film, you have to make sure that they all have the same character of that, you know, that their personality doesn't change depending on who's animating.
It was a challenge because we had familiar 2D animation of Casper, and we had to model them in 3 dimensions, and then from there we had to take and actually move them in 3 dimensions.
And what we do is we build 3-dimensional shape in the computer that's a wire form. And starting with that wire form, that has basically a little skeleton in it with all these control points where you can say, you pay attention to this and you move it here, and you move the hand here, and you move the finger here, and you pose everything. And you have controls all throughout the shape of the character.
And here you also see the colored skeletal structure. That's the bone structure that we install for the animators to move the characters.
And then you have to put a skin on it and a texture, and then apply the lighting and the composite phase. And then you make it so complicated it takes dozens of computers to run all night to make the single shot.
Well, we're going to render it hopefully tomorrow and be able to tell, because we don't
really needed to make digital characters that were able to perform. They could not just move around on screen, but they really had to be able to deliver a performance just like a human actor.
I spent 6 months with our production team shooting. I spent a year after that with the team from ILM.
The antic still feels a little bit big to me. You know, if it's
especially in Casper, you know, the ghost had to be directed. So when he's through directing, he's still directing for another year until all the shots come in.
And in our world at ILM, we measure everything in seconds and frames. So, for instance, a 10-second shot, 240 frames, that's a long shot. This movie has shots that run a minute. They're killer shots.
There were so many of them, you know, 420 effects, something like that. So many of them that we were constantly getting the shots and rebalancing. By balancing, I mean re-editing just for frames. A frame matters in a match, in an action match.
Because the animation, what Casper is doing or saying in any one given shot, might be slightly longer or might be slightly shorter than what Michael had estimated it would be. So that's kind of the ongoing process in post-production.
I don't think you're going to find a director that's going to want to give over the direction of a star of his movie to somebody else. So it's important that Brad be involved in this, and he really rose to the challenge and is in here, dealing with the animators, all the time.
And it gives them a direct director's input upon that process, which is vital to them being able to interpret what he sees in his head, a visual tool.
I think the big leap that's happened on Casper that was not on Jurassic Park was that we now have a character that needs to perform. He needs to act and emote and go through a full range of human emotions. And it's been very difficult to figure out how to get essentially these pixels to look like they're an actor.
Making these guys seem like they're thinking and feeling. Because if you recognize that in him, you'll feel for him, and you'll care for him, and you'll want him to win out, and you'll want him to get the girl in the end, because you've been there. And you have to be able to recognize that in his performance. And I think we've been successful in doing that. And that, for me, has been certainly the most rewarding part of this whole project, is figuring out how the heck it was we were going to do it, and then actually doing it.
106, just the bad. 106. 3, 4.
James came in, looked at the film, saw it for sort of the modern fairy tale that it was, and wanted to bring all of those elements to it without it becoming saccharine.
The films I tend to pick now are films that sort of try and do something for me a little bit spiritually, as opposed to just our, jobs. I try not to be self-important or think too much or too highly of the music that I write, because to me, until it's all finished, it's like this spider web, and everything's in the right place in a way. And every time I hear another piece of music or I go to a movie while I'm working on something, it's like jiggling the spider web, and it could come apart. I didn't know what Casper was going to be like when I saw it, not knowing the comic strip that well. And when I saw it, it sort of had this charm, and there were so many possibilities. And what they were looking from me was not cartoon music. They were looking from me to give something to Casper that I think comes out, which is this lost quality of youth or childhood that he's given up and can never recapture. And it makes it more of a fairy tale. And there were a couple of cues that were just so magical. It was just left the room in awe. It just sort of transcended what the movie was doing. It just was so wonderful. And it's just nice to be sort of part of that. I don't know whether it's the music that acts as a catalyst or the film that acts as a catalyst or just everybody hearing this great sound in the room. But it's wonderful when that happens.
He was just a very generous personality. I feel really lucky because James was very patient with me, and again, never had a problem. So he was a great pleasure.
Casper?
Sounds great. Thanks.
My experience with my first premiere in this movie was especially sort of loaded because, again, this is a picture that I had not previewed. We didn't test this film. There was no time to test the film because basically half the cast was digitally created. And had we tried to take it out and test an early cut, half the film wouldn't have been there. So I had flop sweats like you can't imagine. I locked myself into the middle of a row at the theater. I didn't want to give myself a chance to escape. I was just out of my mind. It's a surreal experience. I mean, it's exciting. It's what you work toward, and you can't believe these people are all here to actually look at your movie. We had this vast premiere party on the back lot of Universal. I showed up and again looked at all of these preparations, all these arrangements, and again I had a very out-of-body feeling like, wow, this is really wonderful. I wonder what this is for. And then suddenly like, oh, wait a minute, this can't quite be. It's one of the odd things about the public birthing of your film. You know, it's a different experience than what you know, which is being locked alone in the cutting room for so many months.
Seeing the movie for the first time finished, I mean, you don't think about it. You just think, oh yeah, I'm filming this movie. You don't really understand like the whole gist of it, especially for me since it was my first big movie. And just seeing myself or seeing my voice up on the screen and seeing the whole final like finished product done, that was pretty neat. I mean, there's no other experience that you could say that. Just working 5.5 months on something so hard and seeing the final product so good. I mean, there's not much more you could ask for. That was probably the most memorable experience I could think of.
With all of its comedy, with all of the sort of wild visuals, I still felt that at the end it did have a certain sense of emotional healing at its heart. And what I remember being really thrilled about, where the surprise that they had was that they could not only enjoy the film, but actually find something maybe moving about it by the end of the picture.
You know, the best part about it is I have like 5 godchildren and 2 nephews. So now I'm a hero. I mean, they didn't care I was on Seinfeld or Roseanne. They don't care. But that you're Fatso the Ghost, the kids loved it.
Brad Garrett, Fatso. I still consider Casper, the movie, the best thing that I have ever done.
I really enjoyed it. I was very, very proud to be part of it.
I was very proud of the film. It was like hard to say goodbye at the end of the film. Everybody's just like all sad and crying and stuff.
Coming back tomorrow?
Missed you.
Are you done?
Yeah, first films, it's like any first experience, you know. You'll never forget the experience.
I don't know. There's not much you could say. Just like, it's like a family. That's all I could say.
Oh, people, please! You're sweating nail construction pipes, for Christ's sake! Let's do something!
The doors are sprung now.
They're popped. That's my car.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.